Welcome to The Screen Queen, the show where I'll be talking about your favorite TV show or your favorite movie. You'll just have to listen to find out. This is your host, Samantha Parrish. Hello there, and welcome back to the show. As always, I am your main media queen, your screen queen, Samantha Parrish. So I have to come clean. The Grinch is my favorite Christmas character of all time. Like, it beats out every single Christmas movie I've ever seen in my life. And the Grinch has aged in a way that not many people dislike this dislikable character. Even people that have never been a fan of the Grinch have no problem with the Grinch. It's just something that people respect in their own way as a part of the Christmas culture, but it also went a little bit further than Christmas culture. I'll be going through every Who fact and Who history for the lovable curmudgeon of Christmas. I'll be covering the 1966 special, the 2000 Jim Carrey film, and whatever it was that Illumination was trying to do. There's a lot of holiday history with this one, so sit back, relax, get your dog Max, because this is the history of the Grinch. So I can't think of any other way to start this episode than the guy who started it all, Ted Geisel, also known as our beloved Dr. Seuss. One morning, Dr. Seuss got up and he was looking at himself in the mirror, and he noticed like a expression on his face, as he called a Grinch-like expression on his face. And he just got the idea about a guy that steals Christmas, just came to him like that. And he began working on it. And it became a beloved bestseller. And then it became the 1966 special. But when the production went going to make the Grinch, the animator, Chuck Jones, who you might be familiar with as the guy who did Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, many cartoons of Warner Brothers, and being at the helm, he had to ask Dr. Seuss, what color is the Grinch? And Dr. Seuss was like, I hadn't thought about that. When the Grinch was published, the only colors that are present that isn't the white paper is the color red for his outfit. And that's the only thing they use because coloring is expensive. I would know. Jeff Bezos gladly takes a huge portion of the money I make from my books that are published in color. It's a thing, let's just say that. So, to expand more on it, the color that was selected was lime green, the one that we see for the Grinch. However, when it was settled that the Grinch was going to be green, Chuck Jones was the one that decided to have the Grinch the specific color because it was the color of a car that his wife used to have. And he hated that car so much. It was the first thing that came to his mind was, my wife's ugly car. Let's go with that color. What a wonderfully creative thing. But not just the color was something that Chuck Jones got to have the final say on. The irony that the Grinch doesn't look like the Grinch is supposed to look like, and it's very obvious. If you look at a caricature of Chuck Jones when he drew himself, and then you compare that to the Grinch, they look a little similar. And Dr. Seuss was the one that pointed it out, saying, the Grinch looks like you. And it just kind of came up. It just, whoopsie-doozy. Sometimes you just get into a creative scene where you end up like repeating the same animation or doing the same thing, and that just kind of happened to be his own staple that unknowingly went into the process. But Dr. Seuss was like, you made him mean. That's all I care about. It's good. However, there was one skeptic thing about the Grinch, and that was the man who voices the Grinch, Boris Karloff. When I did my digging on IMDb on who was involved with the Grinch, I clicked on the name that was the whole star of the show. Well, I wouldn't say whole, but we'll get into that much later. Boris Karloff is mostly known for horror films. He is the guy that's known for Frankenstein and many other horror films. He still did horror films until the day he died. He's like in it for the love of the game, not the fame. However, when you're going to choose the guy that does Frankenstein for a children's cartoon that does raise some eyebrows. And many people in the staff were very intimidated by him. They were kind of surprised, like, really? We got Boris Karloff from the horror films? Okay, that's a interesting choice. But then again, when you look at it, that is kind of perfect. You would need someone that has such an empowering presence to go to a character that is very alarming, intimidating, angry. That is the perfect person to bring everything to life. He has such a presence. And looking at some of the pictures that they took where he was working on it, you could clearly tell Boris was having a good time. The whole team behind the Grinch was very impressed how Boris said, okay, how do you want me to do this character? What do I have to do? Knowing that this is not going to be like the horrifying stuff, which is a nice little element for some actors that don't want to make the mistake of utilizing something from a different craft in a different criteria. With Boris Karloff being involved with the Grinch, it does make an unexpected plan of irony that the next time the Grinch would be made with Jim Carrey's How the Grinch Stole Christmas version, Anthony Hopkins became the narrator, who we all know what Anthony Hopkins is from, and it makes it hysterical to see that the Grinch somehow has some tie to horror in some way, specifically in the narration department. Not going to be the way it was originally with having a narrator and voice like the Grinch, but still, it's a nice little nod of like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon to see how many ties you can bring all the Grinches together. And trust me, those ties are going to be a little bit limited when we get further in this episode. But getting back on track to finish up How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the last thing I want to talk about is the music. The music is something that truly does push the Grinch a little bit more. It pushed it for me to like the Grinch when I got older. The man behind the polka-inspired music for the Grinch is the composer Albert Haig. Now, if you don't know who that is, that's okay. That's what I'm here for. He is known for making the music for the televised version of Fame. So on top of Fame, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, he also had a small role near the end of his retirement where he played the psychiatrist in Space Jam. That is just beautiful irony that no matter where he's been in his career, he somehow ends up going his way back into Chuck Jones cartoons. It is hilarious, but I would have never guessed in a million years that polka would be the inspiration for the Grinch, but looking at it, it really does add a lot. But the biggest clincher of them all is the singing voice for the Grinch. The singing voice of the Grinch is Thurl Ravenscroft. Thurl Ravenscroft was just one of like the few voices in Hollywood that you could say is the voice. He has such like a deep guttural voice to do, you nauseate me, Mr. Grinch. Like, it's just very complimentative of the kind of happy sounding songs that are actually kind of terrible if you think about it. Looking at the lyrics of, you're the giver of sinful sots. Like, why is a sot so sinful? You got moldy purple splots, and you stunk. Like, it's such, terrible things to be said about a mean guy, but you love the songs. They're so great. However, the funny part, though, is with half of this special being mostly narration or mostly songs, Thurl Ravenscroft did not receive a credit. When you look at the opening of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, it just says, voiced by Boris Karloff and narrated by Boris Karloff, too. That's it. Boris Karloff's the only guy that got credited. Thurl Ravenscroft did not get a credit, and to kind of stretch it a little bit further, the woman, the legendary June Foray, who does Cindy Lou Who, also was not credited. It makes a little bit more sense for June Foray at that time because she was not on screen long enough. Well, you don't hear her long enough. She just kind of makes little bits of presence. She only has like one line. Thurl Ravenscroft takes up half the thing. So that does kind of, make you wiggle your nose and go, what's going on here? And after The Grinch aired, Thurl Ravenscroft got a phone call. One of the people a part of the production for The Grinch notified him saying that it was not cool what happened, that he went without credit, and they were going to call up the newspaper and put in a special bulletin saying, sung by Thurl Ravenscroft. And when Thurl Ravenscroft told the story about what happened afterwards and not receiving the credit, he said it moved him to see that there was action that was taking place after it happened. And it's a nice little sentiment that happened. I mean, the guy is very well known, like I said. He's Tony the Tiger from Frosted Flakes, among many of the things that he's contributed to, but this by far is still his most favorite work. He said he loved every minute of it. And I have one last thing to say about The Grinch, and this is just for me. This is one of my favorite things. This is one of the favorite things I've ever seen about The Grinch. I've mentioned that there is a special that came on TNT that aired in 1994, and Phil Hartman was the host of the show. And he went into every single nook and cranny to talk about what happened with the process of The Grinch, people behind it, with most of the stuff I've already talked about. And there's a very interesting tidbit that he did with wondering who else could have voiced the Grinch, and just had some fun with it. And he did an impersonation of John Wayne, Jack Nicholson, the chairman of the board, and it's just such a wholesome thing, but also he did a damn good job that I'm like, I could have seen that. I definitely could have seen that if it wasn't Boris Karloff. And I love the way that Phil Hartman gets so animated talking about the Grinch. He lived in a lot of productions like that with the Grinch, so I'm sure he was thrilled that he got to host a whole special about the Grinch. He even joked in the beginning and said, I am a member of the cult of Seuss. And it's just, I miss him so much. Every time I watch that, I'm like, fuck, I miss him so much. But it's not just Phil Hartman. There's special appearances from Audrey Geisel, the widow of Dr. Seuss. Chuck Jones also makes an appearance in there. And I mentioned in my last episode that two people from a certain little movie called The Nightmare Before Christmas show up. Tim Burton and Danny Elfman talk about how the Grinch inspired them, and they give some really good commentary about it that I absolutely love. And there's many other feature performers on there. I implore you to go watch it. It is an amazing special. I wish they could air it again, but I'm just glad that it exists in DVDs just to get a little bit more of the Grinch and get that one cool part of our history that talked about an amazing Christmas special. You know, not many specials get that, especially one for as short as Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas that was able to still be known all of these years. Like, even with me talking about on my show, that I get the chance to dive into all this material. And it is a little bit ironic because when I was younger, I did not like the Grinch. I thought it was terrifying. And anytime it was on TV, I was just like, I don't know how I feel about this. I don't know what's going on here. And this is a short little story I want to share, but many Christmases ago, it was me, my grandparents, my mom, my aunt. Don't know where my uncle was, but I know that my cousin Jake was in his little rocker pointed towards the TV that was playing The Grinch. And I did not want to voice that I was scared of the Grinch, but I also did not want the TV off because, you know as well as I do, when you're a child of like the early 2000s, the TV is your therapy. I did not want my therapy off. And I had told my my aunt, I was like, can we get Jake away from the TV? It's very scary. And of course they turned to me like, well, obviously he's a baby, he doesn't know what he's watching. So I kind of outed myself that clearly I'm scared of the Grinch. And so my aunt and my mom are like, well, Sammy, if you're scared of it, we can get the TV off. I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm just worried about Jake. It's like I'm trying to, like, brush off my own bullshit. It didn't work. But the irony in the years to come that I would end up coming to, like, love The Grinch, and it became a special that I would watch in my teenage years, like anytime I got home from school, and I would look up on IMDb when it was going to air around December time and make little notes so I could know when to tune into. And that was always, the hype of being a child in the 2000s was like having to race to the TV and get there a certain time, like making a whole event of it. Whereas today you just go, oh, I can just pay the money and stream it and watch it whenever I want. But back then it was a race. You had to get there. You had to be prepared. It was the event of the week. It was what kept you going, and that was what kept me going. And it really got me through Christmas time. And when I got to be an adult, and I was working my second job, I got to buy The Grinch for myself. And it was the first thing I got at my second job, which ironically was FYE, yeah, no shit, the Screen Queen worked at a media store. Yeah, big shocker. But it was quite lovely that I got to be able to buy something that was very special to me, that I could still have today. I still have it on my shelf. The fucking price tag is still on it. That's how old it is. So, that's my history of The Grinch. That made one story turn into three. Thank you so much for bearing with me. I do find that funny. 3 stories in one show out of an episode that's going to be covering three Grinch stories in one episode. So, this is something that I also want to bring into the episode because it is called The History of the Grinch. And I feel like I would be failing in my duty as a host to not address everything else like I do for most of the history episodes I present on the Screen Queen. So after The Grinch came out, there was some other specials. There was one that came out in the 70s called Halloween is Grinch Night, where he is not voiced by Boris Karloff, because Karloff had passed away at this point, and they got in the actor who voiced Captain Hook from Peter Pan. So it still fits the mold of the Grinch, and it's wonderful, and it does have like a bit of a unique presence that's a little bit more aligned to the way that Dr. Seuss drew the Grinch. So it kind of goes a lot more at the accuracy. And then there was The Grinch Grinches the Cat in the Hat, to bring forth 2 of the idols of the whole Seuss universe. Kind of like our first Avengers, so to speak, having that. And it was a kind of a unique twist to bring more into the Grinch into the 80s. And in the 90s, there wasn't really anything for the Grinch. Then finally we have the 2000 How the Grinch Stole Christmas. The 2000 edition of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, it's aged a little bit interestingly. I remember watching it when I was like, I think I was like 12 years old, yeah. And ironically, I watched it during the summer because obviously Christmas in July, and I wasn't sure how I felt about that. And even now, people still don't know how they feel about it. They're a little bit kinder to this one. I will say that this version of the Grinch has gotten a little bit more praise. This version was directed by Ron Howard. And if you don't know who Ron Howard is, you could just throw a dart at any movie, and I'm sure you will hit a film that he has produced or made, like Backdraft, Parenthood, Angels and Demons, that Star Wars movie, which name I can't remember. Oh, the Han Solo one. There we go. I knew I would somehow remember it. I'm kind of surprised. But knowing he did the Grinch, I'm glad it was in his hands. It does look like the storybook has come to life. I mean, there's a little bit more creative liberties, but honestly, if you're going to be making something in the same tone of the book, why not have a little bit of fun? It is a fun world. I don't know why the fuck it exists in a snowflake, but okay, teach his own. I'll go with it. Everything just looks like a Barry Sonnenfeld dream come true. Everything just looks so wonderful. You just want to reach your hand out and just go ahead and touch this world. It feels like it's touchable. I don't know. It feels weird to say that, but you know a movie's doing something right where you really cannot get your eyes unstuck from this world that you're looking at. But then you get to see the story, and it kind of makes you go, where are we again? What's going on here? There is a lot of layering in The Grinch. They gave Cindy Lou Who more of a backstory. They gave, well, not really backstory, I would say a family, and that is her backstory, and she's kind of like an arc corrector in a way, is the way I would probably say her character is in there, than just being the girl that picks up the ornament and gets bamboozled by the Grinch. And then there's the love interest of the Grinch. Like, oh, I would have never guessed the Grinch was gonna have a love interest. It's just an interesting little tidbit to throw in there. And then there's something with the mayor, so you do have a central villain. Comparing it to the original, there wasn't a villain. Like, the Grinch was essentially the redeemed villain, and they kept it just like that. You know, you add on so many villains, you're going to have a superhero nightmare where you don't know which character you know is going to be redeemed or screwed or both. You just don't really know. It's like that saying, too many cooks, get out of the kitchen. But I'm not going to lie, I do like the mayor. I know that people aren't too keen on Jeffrey Tambor these days, but I do like the amount of silliness that he does bring to this villain. Like, obviously, he's a schmuck. I like him for being a schmuck. It's gonna happen in the series that he's gonna get his comeuppance in his own way that the Grinch will deliver to him. But there's just so many different layers to this. But I will say, my favorite moment in this movie still lives in my head rent-free. Near the climax of the film, where the Grinch is humiliated once again, having to go through this PTSD flashbacks, and he destroys the tree, and the mayor just goes, can't we just go back to the way things were, Grinchless? And everyone just like brushes off like nothing ever happened, and Cindy Lou Who's family comes over to her. I love how we don't see her face yet, but the look on her family's face doesn't get enough credit for the amount of concern and sympathy they have in their eyes. Like, yes, they just had a Grinch destroy the Whobilation, but their concern is the sad 8-year-old girl. The sad 8-year-old Who girl, I should say. And Cindy Lou Who looks up and just goes, I just wanted everyone to be together for Christmas. And it just, like, kind of breaks my little heart, but I also appreciate it that you did have a moment with that family. With every layer that we get in this film, there's some layers I can appreciate. I love that specific layer. I also love the one line from the Grinch that I think is just so perfect that it gets a pass, is when the Grinch is trying to hail a taxi, and he goes right by him, and he goes, it's because I'm green, isn't it? Like, okay, that gets a pass. There are moments that, like, you wouldn't think would be in there, but you can kind of give it a bit of a pass and go, all right, you made me laugh. I'm not going to be so hard on you. And that's kind of the way people feel about the Grinch these days. But here's the weird thing to me, though, babes. There are two different versions of this film. The reason I say this is because there's an awkward cutaway. In the version that is made for TV, there is a scene where Lou Who, well, that almost hurt my tongue to say that, is going to Cindy Lou Who's teacher's meeting after school, because Cindy Lou Who said, I want to nominate the Grinch, and that was a cause for concern, and the blinds flew up as if the Grinch is some cursed name, and then Lou Who stands up and his butt is stuck in the desk, and I'm like, that's hilarious. However, when I went to go watch it on streaming, that version wasn't there. It is so odd. There are scenes I look forward to watching in the streaming version, they're not there. The classroom meeting. And then there was some scenes that had to do with, the scene I hate the most did not end up in the streaming version. There's a kind of a layer of the film where Cindy's mother Cindy Lou Who's mother gets like a bigger arc, because in the original, Cindy Lou Who's parents were just off screen. They were probably the ones holding her hand in the animated version, and in this one, they make her parents like very busy people, very overachieving people, but also people with like a good heart. So I do love that you do get the sense that Cindy Lou Who does have good parents, which I really want people to remember when I get into the next film. But anyway, back on track. The layer of the light battle between Betty Lou Who and Martha May Whovier. Can't say that without getting a little bit flustered. I mean, fuck, look at her. She's a good-looking Who. Anyway, that whole layer of these two Whos, oh, that hurt my tongue to say, it's revealed that Betty Lou Who won. Her name is on the pamphlet. But the mayor has a thing for Martha May Whovier, so he rigs the whole competition to say that Martha May won, even though Martha May got nothing on Betty Lou. And you just see the devastation in Betty Lou Who's eyes. And for me, I hate those types of scenes. I hate it when someone doesn't get to win because someone else decided to be judgmental and rig something. It is an awful quality of life. I hate that so much. So part of me doesn't mind that scene doesn't exist, but a part of me is also bothered, like, the continuity doesn't really make sense. I would rather bear with that and skip the scene and know that it's there than feel like others are getting deprived of the whole experience. It's just an odd thing. I don't know why they have to cut some of those scenes out. It's strange because it's streaming. Maybe there was a problem with those scenes. I don't know, but it's odd. Well, before I spend too much time on the second movie, I feel like it's time that I have to talk about Jim Carrey being in the movie. I feel like this episode wouldn't be complete without it. I mentioned earlier that Jim Carrey does give some good quips. And let's be honest, looking at the whole timeline, despite this film coming in before he would start doing dramatic works, you can kind of see a little bit of it, though, in The Grinch, with the way that he would react emotionally. You really do get the sense that the Grinch is such a heartbroken character. It gives so much empathy to him knowing why he had to leave. I know most of it is due to the younger version of the Grinch that is played by Josh Ryan Evans, who died a couple years after the Grinch, but still, it carries the Grinch a whole lot more. Carrie can, for lack of a better word, carry on from that emotional development of the backstory for the Grinch. And you do get the sense that he just hates Christmas. I love the moment where he's being asked to shave himself again, and he has this look of anger on his face, like, you're gonna make me do this shit again. No one likes someone laughing in their face and throwing back a traumatic episode and being so dismissive. Now that we've aged in a way that moments like that are very few and far between to be emotionally aware of someone, it is a heartbreaking scene where he just lashes out and he shaves like the head of the guy. You know, it's countered with him going, "Somebody looks fabulous!" You know, it's something Jim Carrey has to do, but you do get that one solid moment for just a little bit, just the right amount of time to know this guy didn't deserve this. And I do like the movie for that. With the dramatic moments being few and far between, I do like that Jim Carrey does go all out to make the Grinch funny. It probably wasn't the objective, but if you have a funny guy, you gotta make the Grinch funny. One of my other favorite scenes that I love is when he's doing the crash test with himself as the crash test dummy. And that's just a nice Jim Carrey moment, but it does feel like kind of believable that maybe the Grinch would do something like that. And Jim Carrey's the only guy that could do that. And he gets up and he just goes, "The airbags were a little slow, but that's what these tests are for." Like that, I love. But it was mentioned who would do the Grinch if it wasn't Jim Carrey. There were some names thrown around like Eddie Murphy, Jack Nicholson. I think Robin Williams was also possibly a guy to go to, and, well, that would be perfect, but Jim Carrey does do a great job. However, y'all know I'm going somewhere when I say that word. Eddie Murphy did stop by the Grinch production when he was in his attire for the Nutty Professor sequel. And so there's a picture of Eddie Murphy and Jim Carrey together in their characters' costumes. And it's just a nice little gem of the 2000s that maybe we didn't get Eddie Murphy in the movie, but we did get Eddie Murphy passing through the movie production, so it's a nice little attachment to get together. It is a lovely thing to know that exists, and recently it has surfaced a lot around Christmas time, and it does push more appreciation for it. I've seen a lot of the way that Jim Carrey's version of the Grinch has suited itself to certain people. There are certain lines like, "But what would I wear?" And one of my favorites, like the schedule thing where he's just like, 6:30, go with my self-loathing, I'm booked. And it's been seen as a huge coping mechanism. A majority of the Grinch lines were used during the pandemic for certain audios to use for videos. Now, isn't that ironic? A pandemic is one of the reasons why the Grinch had a resurgence in popularity. People were like, these lines aren't too bad if you don't associate with Christmas, and it's still Jim Carrey. It's still great. It just got utilized in very different ways. Knowing that, you can't ignore the fact that the Grinch has a home outside of Christmas. It's such an extra way. It took a long time to get there. Looking at it, took 20 years for it to get into a place of the media that's a very unique home for it. And now, people have a good relationship with this version of the Grinch now. It added a little bit more layers. It's not what people expected at first, but just like the saying goes that time has a way of changing things, and time has definitely been a little bit kinder now than when people were not too kind to it years ago. It's even changed the way that people have seen the live action versions, because after The Cat in the Hat came out, they're like, maybe we were too hard on the Grinch. Carrey did do a good job. It's not something that you want to make again, but for a valid effort, it does have some perks that paid off, and there might be some more perks that are going to pay off in the future after another 20 years probably. Time is kind of funny like that. It might not be the gold edition that people have expected the Grinch to be, but it's copper, and copper's got some value to it too. But let's just say copper doesn't really come close to the last, and probably last, of the Grinch ever made, The Grinch, that came out in 2018. Now, when I first heard about this, I lost my ever-loving mind. I was so excited. I caught wind that Benedict Cumberbatch was going to be the voice of the Grinch, and I'm just like, what? Really? I'm down for that. But we didn't know much at that point. It was just him in a grocery store where he put a can of Who Hash on the top shelf so someone else couldn't get it. He had popped someone's balloon, or he lowered something down with an umbrella attached to this wire for a kid to catch, and the kid went whew, gone. And I'm thinking, it's mean, but that's Gru. That's Despicable Me. And I say that because this is made by the same people who made Minions, Despicable Me, Delorax, and let's just say Illumination has a very strange track record that they made money, but you kind of hate yourself for the fact that you gave money to something that's a generating meme maker, or just keeps making so much money off of the same jokes, and I'm just kind of done with it. So when The Grinch came out, it kind of became a big eye-opener for me to see how much Illumination had been doing the same thing since Despicable Me. I mean, it's still entertaining to some degree, but when you notice the same thing, it gets a little old pretty fast. And they did that to The Grinch. And there's a very brilliant review that was made by one of my favorite movie critiquers that I've talked about in here, Doug Walker, the nostalgia critic, pointed out that nothing feels unique about this Grinch. And he filled in some major plot holes and some very, very correct criticisms that most of the characters in this version of the Grinch, they walk and react the same way as other characters. Like when you look at the original Grinch, the Grinch has his arms in his back and he's kind of stomping around. You know, this guy is angry. Cindy Lou Who makes these tiny little steps as she's going up to greet the Grinch and holds up the ornament. And you know so much by the body language. Everyone's body language is like Richard Simmons on crack. There's so much motion and movement that I'm like, I can't even get a fucking personality off of anyone, these guys. They're either overreacting or underreacting. There's no, like, meet in the middle at all. There's no way those two worlds can kind of come together. It was awful. I remember watching it for the first time, ironically, also in July. There seems to be an unexpected theme here. But I didn't really feel great about it. Like, I'm glad I watched it finally, because y'all know I love me some Grinch. I love the first one. I grew to love the 2000 version, but I cannot bring myself to watch this version again. It doesn't feel right. And it's often been compared to the Jim Carrey version, which, you know, kind of sounds like, why would you do that? Like, that's live action. But the layers were examined. You got to see those layers come full circle. You understood those layers. The Grinch was like the equivalent of throwing things at the wall and hoping they stuck, and never really got to fulfill any of that. One of the major plot holes of the film was the new arc around Cindy Lou Who. In the original, she was very quiet and innocent, and that kind of carried the film in the parallel of the Grinch being so mean and heartless. Then you have the Jim Carrey version where she really wanted to seek him out to get him a part of everything. Now this version, she's dumb. There's no easy way to say it. She's dumb. She is probably the dumbest version ever made. The fact that her whole wish is that she wants to help out her mom, but you don't get to see her spend time with her mom, so she actually is doing the opposite of what she wants. Like, the answer was right there. It's like that Taylor Swift song, like, what you've been looking for has been here the whole time. Like, I want to play that version every single time she leaves her mom. And, like, her heart's there. It's a genuinely innocent thing, but it's also just kind of dumb. Like, she's smart enough to know what it is. She's old enough to know that if she wants to help her mom, she's got to stay, but she's constantly running off and doing reckless things when she wants to be more responsible. She's doing the opposite of what she wants. And it's just dumb. I think the dumbest thing that made her a dumb character was when she's talking to Santa, she has met the Grinch. She should know that she's talking to the Grinch and Santa. But she thinks, oh, well, maybe just Santas look like the Grinch. And that's what it is. Like, it's just, they made her so dumb. And I hate that because kids are smarter than that. Both in fiction and in reality, kids are a lot smarter. We got Gen Z backing us up. The bullshit detector is getting smarter. Obviously, I have a distaste for this character, so let's move on to the Grinch himself. God. So, as I mentioned, I was hyped that I got to hear Benedict Cumberbatch as the Grinch, but I really had to concentrate my hearing to see if I could hear a hint of his voice, because the man is too good at an American accent. Like, when he says things like, well, what would you do? Like, that's about the only line that I was like, yeah, I could hear a little bit of Benedict Cumberbatch in there. And he does do a good job. I feel like it's just a simple film, and there's not really much to work with, so we didn't really get a whole lot of levels. I feel like if this film was made to be in the dramatic tone of the Jim Carrey version, or even the original, I feel like this could have been really good for Benedict Cumberbatch to go a little bit further, but like I said, he just had to do what he was asked, say the lines, as much as they were kind of strange to hear them say that. But he did do a good job. I don't think he gets enough credit for the fact that he did make this film work. But I do find it immensely ironic, though, that this is the tiebreaker film. I mentioned earlier that Boris Karloff is the voice and narrator. The Jim Carrey version had Anthony Hopkins as the narrator. Now the narrator is Pharrell Williams, and I like Pharrell, but I wish they got a horror movie actor to be the narrator just to continue with the ongoing ironic joke that somehow people in horror films are involved with Grinch productions. Like, couldn't you have gotten Robert Englund? Couldn't you have gotten Matthew Lillard to be a narrator? I mean, it would sound like Shaggy, but shit, it's still a horror movie tie-in. You could have gotten anybody. I just don't understand why they didn't continue with that. Like I said, nothing against Pharrell Williams, but that just would have been kind of bringing the joke a little bit more. That would have added into the film that they're aware of the weird history that the Grinch has had with the production. But some of the stuff that Pharrell Williams says, like, it just didn't make me laugh. I know it's for the kids, and I'm sure he had a great time doing it, but I just wish they did something different with the way he narrated everything. Some stuff just didn't fly off. And there are other critiquers that have said that many of the stuff that he did in the narration department just didn't really grab people's attention. And with the other narrators that we've had, from Boris Karloff, Anthony Hopkins, despite them being in horror films, they did grab your attention. They did make you want to, like, know more about this. And Pharrell Williams just sounds uninterested, like he's reading a catalog or a menu. It just, the whole thing makes a mockery of what we've known about this Christmas classic. It wasn't broken. I mean, yeah, like I said, the Jim Carrey version added some layers, but they weren't bad layers. They were weird layers, but they weren't bad. This one just has so many bad layers. They go through certain layers and don't try to go through with them. No one feels unique. They all feel like the same character. No one can stick out. The music isn't present. They had the "You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch." I'm like, oh, come on. You guys sound like you're reading the menu. Just, it makes me so mad. Ugh. The only thing I do like about this movie, probably the only thing I like, is the reference it made to Speed. In the scene where Cindy Lou Who's mother is trying to catch the bus, she goes, "Sam! Sam!" And I'm like, that's Speed. That is Speed. Never in a million years would I ever think that Speed would be referenced. And I didn't think a children's film would do that so uniquely that you knew that it was Speed being referenced. It's an odd choice, but I'm fine with that. Y'all know that's one of my favorite films. I'm not gonna say the entire film was bad when there is some things I did like from it. That's one of the things. I honestly do like Max in this version. I feel like Max was given more of a story. I do like that he has a little picture of him and the Grinch and he's smiling, the Grinch is not, and I'm like, okay, that works for me. I do like that. I like the gadgets in the film. Of all the films that have ever been made, I've always liked the way that every creator has made sure to make the gadgets that the Grinch would use. This one goes a little bit more clever than the past versions, I'll give it that. But other than that, like I said, it doesn't do anything special. It doesn't really go out of its way. It's just rehashing the same story. It has to make a backstory that we didn't really need the second time round. It made the Grinch into an orphan again. I mean, it's just kind of weird the way that they don't really enunciate his hate of Christmas. If the Grinch really hated Christmas, why would he go into Whoville? Why would he interact with his neighbor? Why would he want to hate Christmas when clearly in the backstory he wants to be a part of that stuff? They actually did like a very weird error where they had the little kid Grinch looking at a whole feast, and the narrator, the Pharrell Williams narrator, just goes, and he hated the whole bit of it. Like, I don't think he hates it. I think he wants to be there. It's the narration's not matching with the story. That's bad. Okay, obviously I'm just going to keep getting angry, so I'm just going to go ahead and bring this full circle. It's weird. I hope the last edition we ever get, because clearly this series is not broken. Nothing needs to be fixed. The first version is amazing to have such a Christmas classic under 30 minutes. The Jim Carrey version gave us something unique that aged well, and this last one just didn't really make the mark. It did a valid effort, but it is the final nail in the coffin that nothing will ever beat the predecessor or its weird cousin movie. That's all I have to say about that. But it is a part of the history for The Grinch. And that is a wrap on the episode. This was very impressive to try and keep this under an hour. I'm kind of proud of me. Whew, so this was fun. This was unexpected. I didn't think I was ever really going to pull all three of the Grinch stories together, but I'm glad I did this. I wasn't sure if there'd ever be another Christmas special in the future because I don't know what the future holds for me, but I thought, well, why not go ahead and make it now instead of having to wonder what will happen then? And I did, and it was fun. And I thank you guys for being here for the second episode of the Christmas series on the Screen Queen. Alright, so now is the time to find out what the next episode is going to be on the Screen Queen. And thankfully, it's Christmas every day on the Screen Queen because we both find out together. Isn't that special? So let me get my selections mixed up. Alright, let me get from the bottom. I got the one in my hand. What are you? Tell me your secrets. Okay. Well, I knew this was going to happen eventually. Well, why not? Let's get into it. So, the next episode on the Screen Queen is going to be Elf. Well, here we go. The further you get into the Christmas season, the cheesier the movies get. Well, that will be an interesting episode for next Sunday. But until then, if you want to catch up with me in between uploads, you can find me on my Instagram at the Queen of the Screen. If you would like to talk about how much you like the Grinch or which one's your favorite. If you want to talk about what happened with the third one, I love to rant some more about it. And if you would like to catch up with me on my TikTok, you can find all of my funny movie-related content on there under the Mystical Space Witch. And if you want to get into my book series I created that also, ironically, has a Christmas tie-in to it, you can find the Inglorious Inc. series in the description box. Thank you so much for being here. This is your Screen Queen, signing off. Happy holidays, and stay amazing. Bye-bye!